Welcome to another episode of Walk the Walk and part 2 of my conversation with Marla Cornelius, an independent consultant and coach working with nonprofit leaders committed to social justice. With over 25 years of experience, Marla brings a strengths-based approach to leadership and strategy. She's been working with our students, faculty, and staff as they complete the CliftonStrengths Assessment, helping them discover and apply their natural talents. Today, we'll be talking about what the CliftonStrengths Assessment is and how it helps us be more confident, have stronger relationships, and lead bravely. Welcome to Walk the Walk, where we go beyond talking the talk. I'm Scott McLarty, head of Providence High School in Burbank, California, and in this show, we talk out of school about growing up and being a grown-up, about learning and leading for a better world. Let's get into it. You've been spending time on campus with our students, unpacking their CliftonStrengths results. Now let's start by maybe you can share what are CliftonStrengths. Okay. I've loved them. I've done it a few times over the years. Last time I did in 2022. What are CliftonStrengths? Why is it important? And what exactly have you been doing with our students the last day and a half?
Yes. So what is this tool? It's an assessment tool. Mm-hmm. And it's assessment tool, it's called a descriptive versus prescriptive assessment tool, meaning it helps us understand by description, describing our natural innate talents. They call it Strengths Finder. It's really a talent finder. They didn't ask me in the marketing department why, so I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, and there is a distinction. But anyway.
It was copyrighted and trademarked before.
Exactly. Anyway, yeah. There was a focus group and they said this sounds better. I don't know. But anyway, it's also research-based. It's based on 30 plus years of research, and not just in the U.S. The reason I say all of that is because they did years and years and years of research and studies about what makes people successful, what's right with people. They took the research question instead of what's wrong with us, instead of pathologizing us, which is deficit-based, which is the rest of our culture. They said, no, let's flip that on its head. What's right with us?
What a great question.
I know, right? And now let's study in all different kinds of sectors and professions and situations, how do you get to top performance in whatever that looks like?
Sure.
And then they reversed it from there and developed this assessment tool to identify the top talents that people generally use to be great at something, be strong in something, strengths. And they developed this tool to assess us on these, what they boiled down to 34 themes. So you take the assessment and it measures you against each of the 34 and says, okay, here's your top 5 talents. So everybody has all of them. And that's a big thing. I always talk about strengths envy. Like you look at your friend's report, you're like, oh, I wanted that one, you know?
I know. I'll share an experience of that in a bit.
Yeah, everybody does it. Not everybody. Yeah. Most people do it. Maybe people who have high self-assurance don't. That's one of the 34.
Yeah.
Anyway, we all have all 34, but in different degrees. So your report gives you your top 5. There's 2 different reports for folks who are perhaps interested. You can just do your top 5, but you could also do your full 34. So you see the entire sequence, and they are ranked by order of sort of prevalence in you. So once you know your top talents, then they have this kind of sort of cutesy way to think about it. Gallup Clifton, who's the group that does this, and also I got certified as a Gallup Strengths coach. So anyway, when you learn the whole thing, they talk about name it, claim it, aim it. Name it. It's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Name it. What are these talents? What is this thing? So those 34 themes. And then claim it. How is this uniquely me? So one of mine is intellection, and another one is input. Intellection is I love to be in my head. I like to read. I like to have intellectual conversations. I don't mean snobby conversations, just, I want to break stuff down. I want to know what you think, that kind of stuff, right? Input is I want the information. I like to research. You would never overwhelm me with sending me a bazillion resources over email.
Good to know.
Like some people are like, please, enough. And I'm like, oh, you don't have high input, okay? I'm overwhelming you. But anyway, the purpose of this is once you know what your talents are, then you start learn about self, right? It's a self-awareness tool. How do these show up for me? And how do I use this talent, which is the intrinsic, natural way in which I think, feel, behave, get stuff done, relate to people, make decisions. So much of that, not all of it, but so much of it has to do with our talents. That once I better understand that, I have all these insights about, oh, that's why I want to do things this way. That's why I need that time to process and think, and I can't just jump right in. That's why I don't maybe gravitate towards these other things, because they're not in my top talents. And it's a little bit of a, I have to work a little harder for those. So once we learn those, then we can, so that's the claim it, really understand how it's uniquely me. And then the aim it, what are we working on right now? What are you working on right now? That you want to aim some of your talents at this goal, at this challenge, at this issue. So we were doing that in the sessions with your students, helping them apply the talents to how are they them, what is this about you, how do they show up in your life, how do they show up with your friends, how do they show up with your family, what do you love to do, just hobbies, activities. I asked them, if you had tomorrow off and you didn't have to do anything or check in with anybody, how would you spend your time?
Ooh, I would love to get the answers for all of our students to that question. That'd be fascinating.
And then what, if somebody says, I would pull all my friends together and do like a party, like an impromptu party. Now let me look at your talents. Which talents do you think are driving that? Maybe we would see some woo. Maybe we would see some relator stuff, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody else is like, give me my favorite book and leave me alone, I'm going to the beach by myself. Maybe you've got somebody who's more on the analytical, intellection side, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You said at the start of this part of the conversation that the driving question behind Strengths Finder, Talent Finder is what's right with us rather than what's wrong with us. Talk a little bit about why a strengths-based approach to anything like leadership or learning, because that's why we're doing this is because we want our approach to leadership and learning to be strengths-based, not deficit-based. Right. We don't want to pathologize. So just unpack that a little bit more for us and say, why do we want to avoid a deficit-based or like this focus on areas of growth rather than focused on a strengths-based?
Yeah, great question. And there's a couple reasons. One is it's more effective. So Gallup, which I really appreciate about them, as I said, they're database, research-based. They've done a ton of research. When you go on their site, they publish a lot of the research. So I find it really helpful. Also input. So I love it. Mm-hmm. They've done a ton of research on managers. So this is not at school, but human beings, regardless. Managers who focus on their staff's talents and strengths versus shining a big spotlight on where you're struggling. Now, we have to take responsibility for the areas we struggle. Mm-hmm. I always say taking a strengths-based approach does not mean we get a pass for poor performance. You take responsibility for the things that are a drag on your performance or getting in your way or others' way, and flip the balance to let's really maximize the talents and strengths. Yeah, so the research that Gallup did, they found managers who do that help somebody take responsibility for the weaknesses, but then spend the majority of the time maximizing the talents. The staff, more engaged by like 40%.
Wow.
I might be getting that statistic slightly wrong. It's close.
Employee engagement is so low across the board in every industry. It's crazy.
And related retention. Yeah. You know how expensive it is? Of course
I know exactly how expensive it is.
To when you lose somebody and then have to so especially if we have premature turnover versus just natural turnover, that's normal, right? We're spending, so it's smart business to focus on strengths-based. Yeah. So that's one reason. Another reason is when I'm doing something that is inherently energizing, satisfying, fulfilling, it's because I'm working a talent. So that's the other thing I was sharing today with folks. They're called talent indicators. You don't have to take the assessment to get a sense of what your talents are. Yeah. Here's what doesn't work for a lot of people. Going back to ego. So maybe the egoists in the world, this works for them. But for most of us who have some humility, if I just said, what are you great at? What are you fantastic at? What are you so good at? It's awkward, right? Like you don't want to be a bragger. You don't want to feel like you're being conceited, right? So that question isn't always the best question. Instead, if I said, what do you love to do? What gives you energy? You're like, I can't wait. I want to do more of it. So it's those yearnings. You picked it right up. It's the first thing you go to on your to-do list. You get that sense of yes when you're done with it. Those are indicators of talent. So if I'm doing something, whether it's at school or at work or at home, and I'm getting those senses of fulfillment, satisfaction, yearnings, rapid learning, then that's insight to me, like, oh, there's something there. I'm working as a talent. So if I take my talent, so a talent is a way of being, as we said, right? A strength is a way of doing. Okay? So I have an internal talent for something. And once I practice that and bring it to bear and put it into action and do more and more of it, I strengthen it, and I get to near mastery performance on that thing if I keep going at it, right?
Yep.
So if I'm doing something where I'm inherently tapping a talent, I'm going to be more energized, more fulfilled, joyful, versus go home and go, ugh, your brother was in the wrong job. He wasn't working his talents in that job, probably.
Yeah. And who doesn't want that experience in their life?
Right.
Right?
Right.
That sounds so attractive and desirable,
Right.
just in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah, regardless of whatever compensation is associated with that work, or it's just
Yeah.
inherently desirable.
So you take those two reasons, it's smart business,
Yeah.
and it makes for happier people. We're done. And it's more effective.
Why is it so easy for us to identify things we're not good at
Yeah.
compared to things that we're good at?
Ooh, wait, say that again. You think
Why do you, I think it's if you were to ask me what I'm not good at, I would be able to much more quickly list the things I'm not good at.
Yeah, I'm not good at
than
this.
list the things that I think I'm really good at.
Well, my hypothesis is we've been told not to be conceited and brag. Don't be the egoist. And maybe even more important than that is we take for granted our own talents. So I don't even see them the same way you see them. You've ever had somebody say to you, how did you do that? Oh my God, that's amazing. You're like, what? It's just, doesn't everybody do this? No, they don't all do it.
Yeah.
My partner can fix anything. He can, it's also super handy.
I've always been jealous
Oh
of
my
people who are
gosh.
able to
And
do
I was
that.
like, I'm so glad I married you because you can fix anything. We've never paid for a repairman of anything, you know.
I love TaskRabbit.
There you go. So where I'm going with this, right, is because I'm a strengths coach, of course I made him do the Strengths Finder. Of course, right? And we learned that one of his top talents is restorative, which is the fix, is the problem solver. So you see something and you're like, I see what's not working here, and his brain just figures it out and he loves it. I came home and literally my washing machine once was in 300 pieces in the living room floor. It had broken. He's not a repair dude. He figured it out because it was intrinsically interesting to him. How does this thing work? So if I were to say to him, you're a great problem solver, he would have been like, or he wouldn't have just self-identified that way. But once you do the Strengths Finder and you say, look at, you are a really good problem solver. And he takes that, and it's not just the mechanical stuff in the house, but he takes that same set of talents and applies it in a different context to strategic problems at work and other kinds of sticky situations that need problem solving. So the reason it's so helpful is, yes, we're able to have language that we can access around what we're good at and put it into practice in a way that is more, I guess, tangible and action oriented versus just, let me tell you how great I am.
So one of the things that we're trying to do with this is to go upstream, right? I've thought a lot about how I wish I had been able to name it, claim it, and what's the third one? And aim
Very
it.
good.
My strengths a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And there have been people in my life who have named strengths for me, like you did
Sure.
for your husband. But that's not the same as sort of what Clifton allows you to do. And so we're trying to go upstream and really empower our students. So was there anything, like what did you learn or gain from this experience, mainly working with adults, but now these last few days working with our students? Is there anything that stuck out to you in that experience?
You know, in some ways I learned more about myself than what I learned about the difference between working with high school students and adults. You know, full disclosure, I don't even have kids myself. So I was like, wow, I haven't been around teenagers in a really long time. Since
Welcome
I was
to my
one.
world.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. I guess one of the things is more of a wondering for myself versus a conclusive sentence. There was perhaps a little reticence with the students. Like, how is this? What am I doing with this? I needed to give them, I think, more really tangible, specific examples for them to then connect it to their lives. Maybe part of that's maturity between a teenager and an adult, but maybe it's also with adults, they're at work when I work with them. Because I don't do like life coaching. I do leadership coaching in the context of work. Others do, certainly. But in my context, they have their work in front of them. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I approach this thing? Maybe they have a staff, they're supervisors. They have to lead people, not just projects. And so they're really looking for and hungry for, you got a tool that's going to help me? Bring it. Whereas the students are probably still a little sussing it out, And so in a good way, maybe there's a little skepticism. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I think skepticism's healthy. So like, okay, tell me a little bit more about this. Tell me how this is going to help me. We did the 3 sessions. We did the sophomores and the juniors and the seniors. And the seniors, of course, are further along in their capstone projects. So I think that was maybe it was a little easier. I'd be curious to hear back from them. A little easier for them to perhaps grasp because they had this capstone project right in front of them. So it was like, what talents do you have that you're bringing to bear right now on this capstone? Why did you choose that capstone? You could have chose a different topic. What does that say about your talents? So stuff like that. So they were in the midst of it a little bit more perhaps than the other ones. Yeah.
I'll share a wondering too, that like hearing from you and having spent 25 years surrounded by teenagers, I wonder if it also has to do with the self.
That's a really good insight.
If we started early in our conversation talking about self-leadership and leading from within and self-knowledge. The self and the self-understanding of a freshman compared to a sophomore, junior, a senior, it's actually dramatically different.
You nailed it. I didn't think of that.
Huge shit. The self is not the most stable thing for a freshman. It's undergoing so much change.
Oh gosh,
and because the self is so embodied too, right? We can't just separate the self from our bodies, and their bodies are going through so much change. And so I wonder what impact that would have on these conversations about strengths.
I think you're so onto it. I wish I had thought of that. Thank you. Yeah. And I also think, here I am in my 50s. I am still learning about myself.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Right.
I hope I'm still learning.
Right. So when I was a teenager and then to 20s and then 30s and 40s, if I'm still learning about myself, how much could I expect somebody who's much younger to just be readily able to say, oh yeah, here's my triggers. Here's why I do that. Here's what I bring to this. It's going to take a minute, right? Yeah. So I do hope. So you all have invested so much here in the Strengths Finder and in the Strengths work. I really hope that, we had an introduction today, and I know some of them were introduced to it earlier too. So I walked them through what is this tool, how to use it, and some exercises and conversations that they could use to apply it, the aim it. But it's never a one and done. And like anything, adults as well, if you never touch it again or pull that thread forward, it's going to sit on the proverbial shelf, and that's that.
So let me ask, 2 questions, I guess. What do you think we should do next with this? And then if you were a classroom teacher and you knew that your students just identified their strengths, their talents, what would you hope in an ideal world that teacher would do with that information? Right.
So good. So I think of the through line, right? Like think about pulling a thread through versus a standalone segment. So today we had the standalone segment. Of course, here's this introduction. What is this thing? And now it's you sort of sprinkle strengths conversations and questions into everything. Into everything. So, and you don't want it to be performative, but you do want to get it into the culture and into the natural ways in which we talk to one another. So, for example, let's say I'm struggling in a class, right? And likely to have my teacher come and say, hey, Marla, you kind of bombed that test or that project. To take a strengths-based approach, maybe sit down with the students' talents and say, hey, let's bring up your top 5. Okay, so what's hard about this? Okay, cool. So that's not going to not be hard tomorrow because we point out, oh, you have a talent over here. How do you use one of these talents maybe to overcome the challenge you're having or to look at this a different way? right?
I love that. And also, it gets me thinking about that question earlier, what's right with us?
Right. That's exactly it.
And for a young person, when they just bombed a test or struggling with a concept
Yeah.
or didn't do well in a project, the last thing they need is for the unspoken question to be, what's wrong with you?
Exactly.
It's what's right with you and how can we leverage that
That's
to
right.
help you move on, to learn that concept, to do well next time.
And so let's look at your talents. How can you use one of these to help you get through this challenge? Also, in your talents, what's something that you love to do? Go into that energy, not what are you good at, because that's going to be hard to answer. Tell me about like when you, in this class, when have you felt the most energized?
Great question.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, why? Tell me a little bit more about that. Now let's look at your talents. Do you see that anywhere here? Oh, you do. Okay. So how can you maybe approach this challenge in a different way that leverages what you're good at? And we're going to always do some things in our lives because we just have to that we don't love doing and that we're not going to be good at. So if we have some strategies to be strengths based in how we approach it, to reinforce what's right with us, that's a lot of it.
It's very empowering.
It's hugely empowering. And as a teacher, so I would do some of that, but I would also maybe say, you know, when they have choices to pick different kinds of projects, maybe I would ask them, as you're thinking about this, so they pick these capstones. They could have chosen all types of different things.
Anything.
Have them do a moment before they just commit to, I'm going to do a project on, I don't know, the environment, environmental justice. What about that is of interest to you? So before you just commit, and why? And then when they're structuring the project, okay, how do you want to structure it that speaks to your talents and strengths? Because there's probably a different way they could have approached that capstone, I'm guessing. And so had they not had a strengths conversation on the get-go, they may have designed a project for themselves that actually wasn't going to set them up for the most success.
Wow.
Potentially.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I'm going to make sure a few people on my team actually listen to this podcast so they get that. I'm curious, before we move on to the next topic, what advice would you give parents if they know their kids know their strengths now? What sort of conversations do you think parents should start with their kids about their strengths?
You know what would be really cool? It's not just that let's also have the parents do it. And let's have a family conversation. Because also what happens is, and this is a huge part of, so we talked about leading self, and then once I'm in that space, I can then think about leading with others. I like to say with others, so doesn't feel top down.
Yeah.
So in a family, there's often dynamics, always, and some of them are tension. There's friction, you know, whether it's sibling rivalry or, oh my gosh, my dad drives me nuts, but I get along better with my mom, right? What if everybody knew each other's talents and they had a conversation of like, so when I said X, Y, and Z, why did you fly off the handle? What about that just really hit? So example, I can only give an example from my adult relationship since I don't have kids. But wouldn't it be great if we understood that better so that we can communicate better? So that if I did do something that pushed your buttons, I know why. So I can share two quick examples. I shared this earlier. I have a really, really good friend. I love her. And sometimes she just pushes my buttons. And I have high positivity in my strengths. So she has high analytical and high deliberative. And so oftentimes I'll feel like I say something, I'm all excited about it, and she's like, you know what's wrong with that? You know, Debbie Downer kind of a thing.
Wet blanket.
Wet blanket. And it would just get my hackles up. And it was a problem in my relationship because I'm realizing like I kind of, and I love her. I made her do the Strengths Finder too. I'm kidding. Everybody liked to. She has high analytical and high deliberative, I said. So I realized it helped me so much, like, relax. She's just being analytical. She's actually not really being, but I'm interpreting her way in which she's processing whatever conversation we're having as negative.
There's the facts, and then there's the stories we tell ourselves about the facts.
So I was interpreting her as negativity, and that was getting at me. But once I realized she's just an analytical person, I relaxed. So my restorative partner that I mentioned before, so he fix, right? So, he just loves to give advice. And there's some gender stuff, right? So I come home from work and he says, hey, how's your day or whatever? And whatever I say, he'd be like, you know what you should do. Right? And it would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
But he's just being like, looking for the thing that he could fix. And I'm like, I'm not to be fixed, right? But the reason it bugged me so much is I have high individualization. Individualization is one of the ones that's, people who are high in individualization, I want to know everything about you. How do you tick? Why are you unique? What do you love to do? What's your experience of this world? So I was wanting to be seen and heard because that's how that's what I want to do for others. So our talents are often an expression of our needs. If I have high individualization, which means I can't wait to listen to what your story is, I want you to listen to mine. Right? Because that's what makes sense to me.
You want it to be mutual.
But it also makes sense to me. It's the way my brain works. So he's giving me advice, and I'm going, you're not even listening to a word I'm saying. I don't want your advice. And he's going, why is she acting like that? So once we both learned where it was coming from, again, okay, I understand you better. Now, might we still have little moments of friction? Sure. But we can sure get through them much more quickly and have healthy conflict versus unhealthy conflict. If we understand each other better. So back to the family, wouldn't it be great if they could have those conversations? Just like what those two examples I shared with you, those kinds of things.
Absolutely. So let's do one more practical application of this. And it'll involve a little bit of vulnerability on my part.
I can't wait.
I've done the full Clifton Strengths.
Yay.
And I have my full report right here.
My glasses out.
And my top 5 are ideation.
Okay.
Futuristic, activator.
Okay.
Woo, and strategic.
Okay.
So if I were to give you my results, what, as my coach now, how would you coach me? What sort of questions would you ask me to help me understand what name, claim, and aim my strengths?
One of the first questions I would ask you is, how do you get to use your top 5 in your work? Get to, as in it's a joyful thing. You're like, oh, thank goodness I get to bring this one to bear in this. So how does your role get to tap into your talents? Like which of your top 5 do you see you using more?
Oh my gosh, in some ways all of them.
Yeah,
like
good.
I
Give me an
get to
example.
maximize all of them. So ideation and futuristic are my top 2.
Okay.
And in my role as head of school, and especially in my role in working with our board, and I'm also in my role a board member. So I have fiduciary responsibilities. And part of that role is to ensure the long-term future of the school. And that every time I'm in that long-term scenario planning, long-term thinking, I'm ideating.
Yep.
And I'm engaged in understanding multiple possible futures. And it's very energizing and exciting. When I get to have those conversations with my team, it's very energizing and exciting. When I'm doing alumni relations and fundraising work, I'm turning up my woo, right?
Yes.
And I'm leveraging that. And then strategic, obviously, plays into that long-term thinking really well. And I'm, as a head of school, I have a team and they have their teams, and I'm constantly thinking about ways of activating people's energy and excitement in order to help the whole community align to that long-term vision of the change and the impact we want to have as a school, both on our students over the 4 years they're here as students, but also what impact do we want to have on the world, on our community.
Right. Can I see your report again?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I love that. I don't find that you can ever guess. Sometimes I've been right, but before I looked at it, I don't know you, right? We've just met.
Yeah.
So I couldn't have said, oh, I know what I bet I can guess. However, once you see it, you're like, oh, wow, I see the woo in you, right? I mean, here we are also doing a podcast.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that's...
I love banter.
Yeah. And you probably, if you were somebody who didn't have some of those talents, you may have not chosen to do a podcast, but you could have still gotten, the purpose of these podcasts is towards this end. You might have done something different. I also noticed that even though your top 5, those are the strongest ones, right? I love that you did the full 34 because I think you get a lot of additional information and insights out of that. But you also have learner and communication right behind. Those are 6 and 7 for you. So I would imagine that that's also coming into play. But notice on page 21,
Okay.
it says you lead with, and it has those bars.
Strategic thinking, yes.
So see those bars? For folks who may be listening to this, on that page, it's all of the 34 themes are organized into 4 categories. So generally there's a set of themes, that 8 or 9 of the 34 that are related to execution, getting stuff done. And then there's strategic thinking themes that are all about various aspects of thinking, intellectualization, and all that kind of stuff. There's a set of them that are relationship building, all about the interpersonal. And there's a set that are around influencing. Okay. So the reason I asked you to go to that page is our top 10 actually is what it takes. It puts there, not just your top 5, it takes your top 10 and it's weighted and it says, given your top 10, you lead with one of these categories a little bit more than the others. It doesn't mean you don't have those other categories in you. But anyway, you lead with strategic thinking and
then
influencing second.
So
yes.
5,
So tell me about how that, in those ways, how that resonates for you.
I think it's absolutely accurate. So the 5 of my top 10 are in strategic thinking. 4 are in influencing.
Yes.
1 is in relationship building, includer.
Got it.
And none are in executing.
In your top 10.
In my top 10.
Right.
In my top 10. And I joke with my team about this all the time. Like, I can conceive of 10 different planes.
Yeah.
I need someone else to build it.
Yeah.
And someone else to take it off.
Such a good example.
I can also conceive of 10 different destinations that could be all really interesting and impactful in the world.
Yeah.
But I need someone else to handle the details.
What I love about what you're saying is also know thyself. You know, you can be a taskmaster if you have to, but it's going to be depleting.
Yes. And then I need to do something else related to these other
right.
things. Yeah.
So I always try to reassure people, because there is what I call strengths envy. We talked about that. I don't want folks to take away from their own experience of interpreting the results that whatever category is last, so you have execution as last, right?
Yep.
That means, oh my gosh, I don't get stuff done. Of course you do. Look, of course you do. But the difference is we have to go back to those indicators. You know, task mastering, organizing your calendar, checking stuff off your list. Like, it's not internally motivating to you.
Yep.
Yes, you can do it, but it's not internally motivating.
I do it every day.
Yeah.
But it's not what gets me up in the morning.
So that's what we have to ask ourselves, right? And so we want to try to design our lives, frankly.
Yeah.
Curate our experiences, right? In ways in which we can, do more of the things that are truly energizing. It's not that and the other thing that's interesting, so you do have high influencing. When you look at the Gallup data, it's the one category that is most often last.
Oh, interesting.
For folks. Yeah. And I work with a lot of boards of directors, and you should see some of the panic looked on faces when they're like, oh, we don't have any influencing. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And I always sort of remind people, we influence in different ways, right? If the activity of networking a big room, doing a community event is not energizing to you, that's not how you're going to do your influence. Those are maybe the influencing categories. But how else do people get influence? Through relationships, through competence and expertise, by getting stuff done.
Yeah. So
pick the thing that is you, because we can only lead credibly from who we are, and that'll be your flavor, your special sauce of leadership.
Lean into it. Now, you mentioned a couple times strength envy.
Yeah, where are you going? Oh no.
I will confess that I felt all sorts of ways when I realized
Get all the feels.
That empathy was number 26 for me out of 34. My lowest one is consistency, and that totally makes sense.
And you're not, you don't feel any, you're like, that's okay.
No, like, duh. And I still have some feelings about it. Like, why is empathy so low? I feel like I'm such an empathetic person in some ways. But then I'm also like, I can see
So
I
tell
don't
me,
know. That's one I struggle with for some reason.
Yeah, that's a common one. That because it feels like a values judgment against yourself.
Yeah.
The consistency, maybe not as much, right? Our society doesn't assign the same kind of a human value to it. I think that's my
And I've come to
assessment.
terms with my own tendency toward novelty.
Okay.
Which I think is part of the
Yeah.
consistency being low, is because I really favor novelty, new ideas, new
Hence your
futures.
ideation,
Yeah.
futuristic,
Yeah.
absolutely. Again, connecting the dots. So back to your empathy, I did a Strengths Finder session with a group of folks who work in the sexual assault prevention space. Nobody had empathy in their top 10. And they were all like, oh my God, what does this mean about us?
That
'Cause
reaction resonates with me.
Right. They are fierce advocates and
Yeah.
incredible at their job. What we learned, and I suspected this, but they're the ones that figured it out for themselves, right? Was too much empathy in their job, it would have undone them. They couldn't have done it. They would have been a mess working with a survivor of sexual assault. They were incredibly effective because they were very purpose-driven about equity, about the world around us. They were strategic. And of course, they have empathy. It just wasn't top. I actually tried to work there, but I learned then. My empathy is too on high. I couldn't be effective. So
That makes a lot of
I'm a little bit
sense.
more behind the scenes. So people who have very high empathy, the very first place their brain goes is, if I were in your shoes, how would you feel? And it can be debilitating.
Yeah, because it can be, I
could
can
also be a
imagine it'd
strength.
be hard to let go of that. You
Yeah.
can hold on to other
Yeah.
people's pain or
Right.
suffering. The lesson with this last part, I think, is that there is a shadow side to our strengths.
Yes.
And I know, like, one of the things I struggle with is truly being present. Because
Where's that coming from?
futuristic is number
Yes.
two. I think it's a source of my optimism that
Yep.
I'm not tied always to the present, especially if it's not the best.
Right.
I can always see a better alternative future.
Yeah.
And the downside is I have to be much more intentional about developing practices of presence.
Yes.
That's been really helpful to come to know about myself. One of many things.
It's huge, back to the self-awareness. For every single one of those 34 themes, the metaphor we use is, shadow side, I use that too sometimes. The other metaphor is being on the balcony with something, using it positively, powerfully for good impact. Being in the basement, misuse, over-application. Your shadow side of futuristic is when you do need to stay grounded in the present for a minute, and you have to just say to yourself, oh, that's right, because your default is the other. So it's just about strengthening that muscle of saying, oh, there I go, look at me playing into my strength. It's an overuse of that strength, and in this context, aiming another talent at it. So maybe aiming one of the others to say, okay, I need to get present in this moment. My natural tendency is to, not worry about the today. So what's going to ground me? And then you look at your strengths and you say, this one.
Yeah, ideation was the same. I had experienced the same thing when I got into higher levels of leadership positions, because then I would be ideating and everyone in the room would think I'd be deciding
Yes.
to do all those things.
That
and
happens.
oh my gosh, it freaked people out. And it took
That
me a
happens
few
all the time.
years to really understand that I need to say, okay, I'm going to ideate.
Yes.
We're going to do this together. I am not making a decision. We're not going to do all of these things. This is just how I think.
Oh my gosh, that happens to so many people I've talked to who have ideation, who are also in positional leadership roles. Because what comes with positional leadership is power. So if the boss had these 5 ideas, you're going home going, yeah, we just had a fun brainstorm. I'm not wedded to any of those ideas. I don't care if we don't do any of them. Your staff is going, which one are we supposed to do?
How are we supposed to
Oh my gosh.
accomplish all this?
Yeah. So they can get better at asking you, are you just throwing stuff on the wall, and see what might stick? Or are you actually giving us a directive, or you've made a decision?
So the last thing I wanted to ask about is artificial intelligence.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Now, not like, what do you know about AI?
Yeah.
I have a theory that I just want to test with you. And one of the initiatives I just announced under the Leadership Institute is an AI and Humanity initiative. And the driving question is not, what are we going to let AI do? Or what limits are we going to place on AI? We'll talk about those things. But the driving question is, what are the truly deeply human qualities, skills, characteristics, behaviors that people of Providence need to live wisely in this algorithmic age? And how can we leverage artificial intelligence to humanize rather than to dehumanize or focus on the artificial?
Right.
And I'm curious because the work we've been talking about and that you do is very human.
Yeah.
There's nothing artificial about it.
That's right.
Are you experiencing any encroachment of AI? Are there people in your space who are worried about the impacts of AI?
Indeed. In fact, there's all kinds of coaches who are, I saw something just yesterday or today, how to coach with AI. I haven't opened it yet.
Oh, interesting.
I know. It's a big question I would love to sleep on and think more about. Two things that just come right to mind. One is getting really clear and being so purposeful about when I'm going to go use it. So it's not so much about the technology itself. Technology is neutral until you put it into practice. If our intentions aren't clear, if we don't have the best of intentions, that scares me. So why am I using it? And is it to do something with good intent that will cause no harm? The second thing it makes me think of is, how will it make me feel?
What a great question.
How will it make me feel? Am I going to feel dehumanized by using this? Will the people that maybe I'm engaging with another group, and how will they feel about it? So if we can have some humanistic criteria or decision screens that we create for ourselves that say, how will we use it to enhance our humanness and guard against things that could dehumanize us, that would be a really cool exercise. I don't know what the answers to that is, but that could be a really interesting approach.
Well, it sounds like we have another conversation to have.
That'd be great.
Well, Marla Cornelius, thank you so much for joining me on Walk the Walk.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun.
Thank you for joining me on Walk the Walk. Please support us by following, subscribing, and visiting us at providencehigh.org/walkthewalk, where you can sign up for our email list to join the conversation. Thanks again, and see you next time.